The Vics look terrified as the beast turns its attention towards them. It charges at them and they dodge, and Viktoria brings her sword up as it throws its hook, and the blade gets caught in the chain. As Killjoy pulls it back, the sword is ripped from her hand and thrown into the forest. What's up everybody, Jeff here, coming at you with more Malifaux lore guide. This week we're going to be talking about the Viktorias from the Outcasts. So spoilers coming up for all the Viktoria stories, and check in the description below for a list of those stories in case you want to have a look at them. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment, join us over on Discord to hang out, and check out the Patreon if you want to support the channel. And now let's get into the Viktorias. Viktoria had a successful career as a bounty and treasure hunter, even before the breach reopened. She went on many adventures seeking out lost secrets, and accumulated an impressive collection of valuable artifacts. Rumor has it, her collection even includes a Masamune sword. When she received a message from a mysterious employer offering her work in Malifaux, the temptation of a whole new world of treasures was something she couldn't refuse. While riding the train to Malifaux, Viktoria meets a man named Leviticus and his young companion, Alice. She notices that they both have mechanical augments, and the old man explains to her about the dangers of Malifaux and the power of soulstones. Viktoria tells him that she's unafraid, as this won't be the first city she's stayed in, full of thieves and murderers. As Leviticus goes on, Viktoria zones out as she feels a warm sensation and sees the shimmering blue portal of the breach. As they get close, she feels a tingling sensation wash over her, and then it suddenly stops. Leviticus comments that she had a particularly strong reaction to the crossing, and the three disembark the train at Malifaux Station. Leviticus hands Viktoria a business card and tells her to call on him if she ever needs his services. Viktoria tells him that she has a meeting, thanks him, and then walks away. Viktoria makes her way to the Key and Gong. She considers the unusual circumstances under which she received the letter that summoned her to Malifaux. She had been standing in front of a shop, looking in the window at a couple of clockwork pistols, when a man delivered her a letter that was addressed to Viktoria, who would be standing in front of this exact window. The man had insisted that the letter was given to him the day before. At the bottom, it was signed simply Z, and had a picture of a key and a gong. Viktoria enters, and the other patrons pay her no mind once they see the large katana that she's carrying. She heads to a private room, where she finds an old woman sitting at a desk, carving into it with a blade. She asks her if she is Z, and the woman confirms, introducing herself as Zoraida, and asks if she is her contractor. Viktoria asks what the job is, and Zoraida pulls out a deck of cards, shuffles them, and then flips one off the top, the Lord of Winter. Zoraida says that this is the creature. Viktoria doesn't understand, so Zoraida explains that he is not a man but a creature, who has murdered and done far worse, and lives without consequences. His name is December. Viktoria asks for his description, and Zoraida says that she'll tell her what she needs to know, but that these cards can see fate, and that gives them an opportunity to change it. Viktoria is skeptical, but remembers how she received the letter, so she decides to stay. Zoraida deals a 7 of tomes above the first card, and explains that this is her ambition. She has gathered pieces of legends, but Viktoria wants to become a legend herself. Viktoria replies that she was told there would be soulstones in payment, and that is what brought her here. Zoraida flips another card, and places it below the Lord of Winter, the Queen of Crows. She represents the comfort of death. She shows mercy by giving a quick death, and feels no sorrow for the dead. Viktoria decides that some of this rings true, and asks Zoraida to go on. The old woman deals the Ace of Rams to the left, and says that this represents Viktoria's past. It symbolizes what she will use to defeat her enemy, a weapon. Viktoria touches her blade, the Masamune, which is said to be the most powerful blade ever forged. Zoraida deals the 2 of masks to the right, forming a cross with the cards. She says that this is a mirror, and it represents a confrontation with herself. The confrontation can come in different forms, but out of it, Viktoria will find an ally. She flips another card and places it over the Lord of Winter, the 3 of masks. Zoraida laughs and says that Viktoria will be opposed by the 3 sisters, who will work with her or against her, but will hinder her efforts. Viktoria says that she works alone, no allies, and that conspiracies don't bother her. Zoraida then hands her another card, the Ace of Tomes, and Viktoria asks her what this one means. Zoraida replies that it is the locked book, and represents her reward at the end of her quest. Even Zoraida doesn't know what it will be. She then fetches a chest, and opens it to reveal 3 soulstones and a map. After she lays out the map, Viktoria sees that it is a map of the city, and there's a black mark far to the east. Zoraida points to it and says to go there, and she will meet December. She gives the woman a soulstone, and says that when he is defeated, she'll receive the other 2 as her reward. Alice approaches Viktoria as she loads up a carriage, and asks the woman if she can join her. Viktoria agrees, but adds that she'll have to explain to her why she's been following her. In response, Alice tells her that she has a few questions of her own. As they sit down, Alice asks if she's really got a Masamune, and Viktoria says that that's what she's been told, and asks what her interest is in the blade. Alice responds that she's only interested in weapons made by Smith or Wesson, but that she has a client who's interested in antiques. Viktoria points out that if they're going to be traveling together, she can't constantly be worried that the woman is going to stab her in the back, and asks if she's familiar with the Clover's Pact. Alice confirms, and they each put their hand on the shoulder of the other and recite the pact, "My purpose will not injure your own," acknowledging and solidifying a professional understanding between mercenaries to not interfere with each other's work. Just then, another woman climbs in the carriage with a small child who gives Viktoria the creeps. She introduces herself as Dora, and the child as Cade. Viktoria and Alice introduce themselves, and Dora asks them what their business is at the Delta 6 site where they're headed. Viktoria tells the woman that they're looking for someone, and then asks Dora what she's doing there, as she doesn't look like the explorer type. Dora replies that she doesn't have any business there, and that she came to meet her. Viktoria demands that she explain herself, and Dora comments that she was told she would be rude, and then holds out a small box. Alice exclaims that they're Neverborn, and draws her pistol, shooting the child between the eyes, though he doesn't seem to be bothered by it. Dora opens her box, and a green wisp leaks out, and fills the carriage, as Viktoria draws her sword, and slashes at the woman. The blade passes through nothing but air, as the carriage is filled with the green mist, and Viktoria loses sight of the other passengers. Suddenly, she realizes that she's sitting on a tree stump, and is no longer in the carriage, as she jumps up and calls out for Alice. In response, she only hears a few shots from a revolver, and begins heading in that direction, before she sees a figure in the mist. She calls out for it to identify itself, and when the woman steps forward, she realizes that she's looking at an exact copy of her. She tells the doppelganger that this is a better trick than her box, and the mysterious woman replies that fate has woven itself around Viktoria, and that if she kills her here, she will take her place and realize her destiny. She adds that a human will not save this world. It belongs to them. Viktoria asks if she is the ally or the conspiracy, but then decides to worry about it later. The doppelganger charges at her, sword in hand, and as the two women clash, Viktoria finds that the doppelganger is able to match her strength and speed. She notices a green aura flickering around the form of the doppelganger, like a superimposed spirit. As it slashes at her, she ducks beneath the sword, and swings her sword forward. It passes through the doppelganger, leaving no wound, but the green spirit is torn from its body, and it begins to blacken and fade away. Its corporeal form falls over, and begins coughing up a black ichor. Viktoria realizes that the legend of the Masamune was true. It seems to have slain the demon inside, but spared the living. As the doppelganger recovers, it looks up, and then yells out behind you. Viktoria reverses her grip on her sword, and thrusts it backwards. The sword sinks deep into her attacker, and as Viktoria turns around, she finds the Neverborn, Dora, holding up a dagger, meant for Viktoria's back. The woman whimpers out, betrayed, and then disappears in a cloud of green smoke. Viktoria quickly kicks the sword away from the doppelganger, and puts her own sword up to its throat. She considers that the woman just saved her life, but that she's still a Neverborn, as she tells her that she should kill her now. The doppelganger replies that she would do the same if she was her, and after a pause, Viktoria lowers her sword and tells her that she must be a better copy of her than Dora expected, and that she's going to let her live. They're interrupted by the sound of cursing, as Alice makes her way out of the trees, covered in black blood, and when she looks up and sees the two women standing there, she exclaims that Viktoria is beautiful, has a magic sword, and can now make copies of herself, and how it's so unfair that everyone gets to do cooler stuff than she does. Viktoria, Alice, and the doppelganger continue their journey, though the doppelganger travels with her hands bound together. They find a cache of supplies, with 3 changes of clothes, and Viktoria is not surprised, as her employer had told her to come here, and the old woman seemed very sure about the future. As they begin to load up a canoe, Viktoria considers how she seems to have a strange connection to this doppelganger. They both seem to think alike, have a similar sense of humor, and know the punchlines to each other's jokes. The doppelganger had plied her with a series of childlike questions, seemingly eager to know everything about Viktoria's life. As they paddle into a clearing in the swamp, Viktoria looks up to see the stars, and she explains to the doppelganger that where she's from, the people see heroes and heroines in the stars. She asks what their people see in their stars, and the doppelganger tells her that their people see the death of this world. She continues, adding that she's never been to Earth, but she imagines that it must be full of clever people for them to have accomplished what they've done. But clever people can be blinded, and this land used to be full of clever people as well, but some of them had grown bored with their long lives and found dangerous ways to waste their time. As these powerful beings began engaging in more depravity, the people of the world rose up against them, but no amount of magic or technology seemed to be able to stop them. They soon became more desperate and decided to open up a portal to another world, but it was not like the portal that goes to Earth. This portal opened up into the realm of death itself. Death's power infected the land and helped them to defeat the tyrants, but it spread out like a cancer, instilling madness and corruption in everything it touched. Worse yet, some of the tyrants still survived, though their bodies were destroyed. Their power and influence, though weakened, was still able to linger on. With that, Viktoria announces that they've arrived, with a certainty that she only knew because of her connection with her twin. Alice looks up and sees the 7 crooked spires of Kythera. The doppelganger tells Viktoria that December is close, and asks to have her hands unbound, as she was made for this fight. Viktoria tells her no allies, no partners, and they soon feel a rumbling as they notice a steamship headed in the same direction that they are. Alice asks her, "Were you expecting company?" Sonia Crid and Lady Justice of the Guild disembark the steamship with Seamus, Molly, and Rasputina as their prisoners. They make their way into the ruins, and after studying some of the glyphs briefly, Sonia orders Rasputina to speak the words that will finish closing the portal to the realm of death. As a storm begins brewing overhead, suddenly a gust of cold wind shoots down on Rasputina, knocking all the guild officials away, and she breaks out of her shackles and then reads the words off the paper. Seamus yells out to her that he will kill her, and soon the tyrant December manifests itself as a hulking creature. It begins attacking the guild personnel, and Sonia slashes it with her blade, but none of their attacks seem to have any effect. The creature bats her aside, and Lady Justice tries the same, but it is also able to ward her off. December laughs that the heroes of this world are no challenge for him, when suddenly Viktoria appears on a walkway and yells out a challenge to the tyrant. As he goes to engage her, the Doppleganger steps in front of him and tries to attack, but her massive opponent reaches out and picks her up in his hand. The creature asks why one of her kind would even bother to challenge him, and the Doppleganger shoots back that her people have been plotting his death for centuries. Then Viktoria jumps down off of a high walkway, pointing her sword down, and it slices clean through December's form. As the tyrant falls, a horrible sound rings out, bringing everyone in its presence to their knees, but it's then followed by silence. Both Viktorias are able to sneak away before the women from the guild are able to recover. The guild members regroup themselves and recover Rasputina, who was knocked unconscious, binding her arms and legs again. In their confusion, they fail to keep an eye on Seamus, who had freed himself from his captors, and is now speaking the words to reopen Kythera. The massive structure begins to shake, and a portal in the middle of the swamp begins to open. Lady Justice and Sonia don't know what to do, as they see a creature begin to try to make its way through the portal and into this world. Seamus cackles with ecstasy as he's witnessing the end of the world, but suddenly a massive metal construct approaches, firing cannons at the structure and the creature trying to make its way through the portal. The weapons have no effect on the creature, but they do damage the structure, and soon the portal collapses and the creature disappears. As the event takes place, the Viktorias are chasing a group of convicts, along with their crew. As the wave of purple energy washes over them, the two Viktorias are frozen in place. The convicts feel the tickle of the energy, and are temporarily blinded, but as they shake off their confusion, they turn to see the two women not moving. As they try to move in for an easy kill, the Viktoria's Ronin come to their aid and try to fight the men off. As the rest of the fugitives notice what's going on, they gang up on the Ronin and defeat them, before moving in to finish off the two leaders of the crew. As they approach, they're stopped dead in their tracks, as a loud sound like a hammer hitting an anvil rings out from one of the swords the women are carrying. As Viktoria starts to slowly move towards the men, the Masamune begins to elongate, and a face begins to form at the base of the sword. A long metallic tongue begins growing up the blade, and it seems to absorb the blood that is spattered on the metal. The men look on in terror at the two women, who are now filled with bloodlust, being willed to kill by the Masamune's magic. Both women smile as they charge at the group, and it's the last thing any of the men ever see. Though few people can tell Viktoria apart from her twin, the real Viktoria carries the Masamune. The sisters have become inseparable, and while they hire themselves out as mercenaries, their real goal is to find more artifacts that they can sell Earthside or back in the city. There are many valuable artifacts spread around Malifaux, but most people find it difficult to find them due to the Neverborn natives. Lucky for Viktoria, her new sister has inside information on the Neverborn, and they use this advantage to get the edge on the competition. There's often a debate on which of the Viktorias is the real Viktoria. Sometimes it's even a debate between the Viktorias themselves. When they enter battle, one of the Viks carries two swords, while the other carries a sword and a pistol. When only one is present, it could be either of them, because it's unlikely that the same one wields the same weapons every time. The Ronin in the Viktoria's crew have begun referring to them by their weapons, calling the Viktoria who carries both swords Viktoria of Blood, and the other Viktoria of Ashes, for the gunsmoke left by her pistol. The Viktorias are hired by Tara to retrieve a piece of obsidian. When they arrive at the location, they find Leviticus and Alice doing battle with some undead. Leviticus recognizes the Viktorias, and he calls out to them to cut the man's arm off, and he'll finish him, and they can split the bounty. They call back in unison, 60-40, and Leviticus winces but agrees. The hunter tries to pounce on the man, but he lifts up his clawed arm, and the hunter simply disappears. After the Viks fight their way through more zombies, one of them charges at the man and slashes at his arm, cutting it off. Leviticus takes the opening, focusing on the man, and his body crumbles to dust. The only thing left behind is a small piece of obsidian. Viktoria picks it up and puts it in her pouch, and turns back to the zombies. Leviticus turns to leave, knowing that he'll get his share of the bounty, as mercenaries take pride in their reputation. After the Governor General died, many different powers in Malifaux decided to move against the guild. The Viktorias used this opportunity to sell their services to both sides of the conflict, and made a fortune in mercenary fees. After Nythera opened, the sisters suddenly disappeared from the spotlight, though some of their associates caught sight of them in the Doer's library. They seemed to be researching something, and rumors say that one of the Viktorias developed a habit of arguing with her sword. Soon, word got around that the Viktorias were looking for reliable mercenaries to aid them on a special mission, and the response was overwhelming. The Viktorias marched into the Badlands with 6 of the most dangerous killers in Malifaux. They'd need at least that to kill the immortal queen. Viktoria used to be driven by a quest for treasure, but with every new prize claimed and battle won, her desire for something greater grew. Soon none of the artifacts she found would satisfy her, and deep down she knew that nothing would. It wasn't until much later that Viktoria realized this void wasn't really a void, it was a voice. It spoke to her about power and glory, and promised that even the most unattainable of prizes could be won with its help. Eventually, the Viktorias aimed for a trophy that not even the tyrants were able to win, the head of the immortal queen. As they marched into the Badlands, with every kill, the voice became louder, and Viktoria's twin sister's voice became nothing but a murmur. The Doppleganger began to see her in a different light, driven not by glory or treasure, but by madness. The Viktorias lead their men deeper into the forest. As they fend off attacks from the Fae, the bodies pile up, but not many of them are human. As they fight, the Viktorias flow across the battlefield in a swirling tempest of blades and death. As one of their Ronin faces a tree spirit, she slices into its bark with no effect. Viktoria moves towards them, and the Ronin ducks to give her an opening, but Viktoria runs her blade through the woman, cleaving her in two before slicing through the tree spirit. Viktoria's twin looks on in horror as she turns her blade back in her direction and charges forward. The second Viktoria moves to defend herself, but then the first slices down a Fae who had snuck behind their lines. She scolds her sister to keep up as her twin looks at the murdered Ronin, and doubt starts to creep into her mind. They'd won the battle, but the mood was sour as they lost several of their own. As they collect their dead, a Ronin kneels down over her friend who was cut in half, and Bishop comments that most of their dead were killed here, but he does not remember this part of the battle being particularly fierce. He turns to the Viks and asks if they were in this part of the battle. Viktoria replies that they were, as she wipes her blade, and her sister cuts in that Titania's more vicious minions attacked them here, and they tried to help the women, but it was too late. The first Viktoria stands up and says that they need to push on, and that they are to take the valuables from the dead but leave the bodies. Everyone is uncomfortable, knowing what will happen to the bodies when the Fae find them, and the other Vik commands them to obey angrily, though it's unclear if she's mad at their hesitation or at Viktoria's heartlessness. They spend days marching deeper into the forest and being harried by Nephilim and Fae. One night, after mourning one of their dead, Sue, Big Jake, and some of the other mercenaries discuss how the Viks have been acting weird. They've been arguing amongst each other, though they usually never have any disagreements, and Jake had even caught one of them talking to their sword. On his way to pee, Sue is suddenly met with a mountain lion, and as he's about to defend himself, it transforms. Miranda stands before him and tells him that she means him no harm, and hands him a book and a map. She says Titania knows they're coming and is planning an ambush, and this map should show them how to avoid it. He asks about the book, and she says that it contains ancient magic to help defeat Titania. As she turns to leave, Sue asks her why she's helping them, and she says that she wants Titania dead as much as they do. The mercenaries survive the ambush, only due to Miranda's help, and soon they're preparing for the big battle. Victoria Blood looks at the tome as her sister plays with her sword, and she yells for her to focus on what they're doing. She tells her sister that the book is written in Neverborn, and she turns to the page that was marked for them, and says that it's a spell to summon the cursed one, Killjoy. She explains that he's an undead creature from before anyone can remember. His bloodlust could swing the tide of a battle for anyone who could pay the price, but it does not say exactly what the price is. Victoria slashes the table, startling her sister, and says that she does not want help from a walking corpse, and that she can take anything Titania throws at her. As Vic goes to argue, she insists that she doesn't need help, not from Killjoy, not from their team, not even from her. The twin sister is hurt, but she decides not to argue, as she doesn't want to cause problems with them so close to their goal. She tells the woman that it wouldn't hurt to have a backup plan, but Victoria says that if she's frightened, then she can take the others and flee with their tails between their legs. As long as she has the Masamune, nothing can stop her. Victoria of Blood feels her anger rising, but simply grabs the tome and walks away. She makes her way through the camp, as everyone busies themselves and looks for a good candidate. Most of the people here are willing to die for gold, but it shouldn't matter if they died in battle or as a result of something else. She approaches a group of Ronin as they all discuss how to tell the Viktorias apart. As one of them speculates, Viktoria interrupts and asks how she would know. The women are surprised and begin to apologize, but Viktoria stops them and says that they don't need to be sorry. She explains that she and her sister intentionally match each other's mannerisms and fighting style to keep people confused. She makes a joke about how the other Viktoria is obsessed with raspberry pastries. The women are not sure if it's a joke, but they laugh anyway. She then hands one of them the tome, and when the woman looks confused, she explains that they all need to memorize the spell in the book, as it's powerful magic that they will use to win the coming battle. But they're not to speak the words until she gives the order. The women all crowd around the book and start studying it, and as Viktoria walks away, she mutters to herself that everyone has to die eventually. The next day, a full-scale battle rages. The two forces seem evenly matched. The mercenaries have technology and discipline, but the Neverborn have numbers and ferocity. The mercenaries' ranged weapons give them an advantage, as they're able to cut down many of the Neverborn numbers before they engage in melee. A large snake moves through the Neverborn ranks, looking for prey, and it sneaks up on a rifleman, who thought he was hidden in the bushes. It eats the man whole, as his bones crunch and break. The Viktorias fight together, enjoying the slaughter, and they laugh as they cut down the Fae. Then, one of them sees Titania moving among the enemy ranks, and Viktoria's mind is overwhelmed with the words "kill her." They are her words, but they're not her words. Suddenly she takes off after the queen, surprising her sister. As the twin goes to follow, she advances forward, but then notices that without their support, the line is folding behind them. She looks back, realizing that her forces will be overwhelmed, but knows that she can't leave her sister to face Titania alone. She calls out to the Ronin, telling them to perform the spell, as she looks back and sees Titania turning to face Viktoria. As the women start speaking the words of the spell, they find that they're hard to say and give them a weird feeling. Suddenly, one of them feels a strange sensation, like serpents are trying to escape her body, and she suddenly bursts open, and out from her body emerges Killjoy. Silence falls over the battlefield as they all look at the creature. It throws its large hook and pulls a Fae in before smashing the warrior's head with its cleaver. Everyone, friend and foe alike, runs away from the monster. He begins hunting the Fae, but it's clear that he has no regard for the mercenary's safety, and everyone keeps their distance. Jake stands in front of him and tells him to control his strikes, or he will end him. Killjoy just bellows for him to move. Jake swings his tomahawk, and it sinks deep in Killjoy's stomach. As he tries to pull it out, Killjoy lifts his hand and swings it down, throwing the man to the floor. Titania flies just out of reach of the Viktorias, while Vic of Ashes constantly pursues her with her sword out. Her twin sister watches carefully, examining Titania's movements, and looking for an opening. She also runs to her sister's aid whenever Titania attacks with vines and other flora, and Viktoria is left vulnerable in her recklessness. They all sense the monster getting closer as it cuts through Titania's minions. As it approaches them, it suddenly stops, with its cleaver in mid-swing. It looks at Titania and recognizes her from a long-faded memory. He calls out to her, "My queen." Titania calls back, telling Killjoy to prove his loyalty to her, and the Vics look terrified as the beast turns its attention towards them. It charges at them, and they dodge, and Viktoria brings her sword up, as it throws its hook, and the blade gets caught in the chain. As Killjoy pulls it back, the sword is ripped from her hand and thrown into the forest. Viktoria screams. She can still sense the blade's presence, but she feels empty inside, like her heart has been torn out. She needs the sword back. She looks at Killjoy and Titania, who stand between her and the sword, and doesn't care about the danger. She needs the sword back, no matter the cost. She sprints towards him, trying to get past the monster, but she doesn't see his cleaver coming down in time. Luckily, her twin sister does, and tackles Viktoria out of the way, as the huge blade comes crashing down. She grabs her sister's pistol and fires it into Killjoy, but the monster is unfazed. She calls out to Sue to gather the men and retreat, as she holds on to her sister, who's still trying to make her way to the sword. She tells the woman that she won't let her die for the blade, as she physically pulls her away from the battle. The mercenaries all pull back, and the Fae don't pursue, many of them having already fled or died. Titania watches them go and smiles. The further she gets from the sword, the weaker Viktoria starts to feel. Eventually, she no longer feels its influence, but her body and her head are in terrible pain. Then she realizes that she suddenly fears death again. She asks her sister how many are left, and the twin tells her that there's 9, including the 2 of them. She adds that they'll give them all proper funerals and make sure their families are taken care of. Viktoria tells her that she's sorry, as the sword was controlling her, but then she corrects herself. It was influencing her, not controlling her. She can't even remember when it started. Her twin says that those actions were not hers, and that they will return to Malifaux and begin to rebuild. Viktoria replies that she can't, as without the Masamune, she is nothing. Her twin tells her that she is Viktoria, and without her, the sword is nothing. It was her own effort that made her who she is. She gets close to her sister and looks her in the eyes, as suddenly her eyes take on an inhuman look. She whispers quietly that if she were anything less, things would have turned out differently on that day. They sit and look at each other in silence. After a long while, Viktoria asks if they should go back for the blade after they recover. From behind them, Sue says he couldn't help but overhear, but that most people who escape their shackles aren't so eager to go back to imprisonment. Both Viktorias nod and tell him to tell the others to get some rest. They need to keep moving quickly so that they can save the few people they have left. Back in the forest, Titania is presented with Viktoria's blade, and she immediately recognizes that contained within it is the tyrant shez'uul. The sword was the reason that most people could tell the Viktorias apart. The original Viktoria was the one who carried the legendary weapon, while her sister simply used ordinary blades. Everyone joked that they used to switch off wielding the Masamune to confuse people, but these jokes always rubbed the Doppleganger the wrong way. Viktoria never let the sword out of her sight. Losing the blade had been traumatic. Without wielding it, Viktoria felt that she was reduced to nothing. Eventually, her rage gave over to acceptance. She still had her sister. The presence of the blade had weakened the bond that the two of them had shared, but now, with it gone, they're more reliant on each other than ever. The sword is too powerful for anyone to wield, and the fact that Titania has it makes it even more dangerous. The sisters delivered her the blade, and now they must be the ones to bring it to an end. And that's everything so far on the Viktorias. I think they're pretty cool characters, and I'm wondering what kind of role they're going to play in the story going forward, now that they don't have the Masamune, and they don't have shez'uul influencing them to hunt down Titania. It seems like they're still going to go after Titania, primarily to destroy the sword, but it'll be interesting to see how that changes things. I feel like they haven't really done much with the fact that the other Viktoria actually still knows things about the Neverborn from her time as a doppelganger. It'd be really cool to see them explore that element a little more, and maybe we can learn a little bit more about the history of Malifaux, with the two of them going out on adventures. But maybe that'll tie in a little bit with the character Tiri that we're going to have coming soon, because she's actually going to be an outcast. I'd also like to see some more stories that actually feature some of the characters in their crew, because a lot of them don't really get a lot of spotlight. But anyway, drop a comment below and let me know who your favorite character is in the Mercenary crew. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment, join the Discord, check out the Patreon, because you could have seen this video almost a week ago. And of course, big shout out to the extremely cool kids tier over on Patreon, the Steam Powered Scoundrels, and Dogmatized. And thanks for watching.